Before we start, you need to know this might be shocking. This story is just for learning and fun only. This is what really happened in the courtroom during Sean Diddy Combs' trial. A news reporter wrote down everything that was said. If this story surprises you like it surprised everyone in the courtroom, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more celebrity news that other news shows won't talk about. Nobody thought Ashton Kutcher would walk into that New York courtroom today. Everyone was tense and watching the big trial when Kutcher suddenly showed up. People gasped out loud, and even the judge stopped talking in the middle of her sentence. There was no warning, no written speech ready. Just Ashton Kutcher breaking his silence with shocking news that would change everything. Until that moment, Kutcher had kept his perfect Hollywood good guy image. He was the tech business guy, the family man, the charity worker who fought against people who hurt kids. But something had changed. Maybe it was all the proof against Diddy. Maybe his heart finally couldn't take it anymore. Maybe he realized that staying quiet was helping protect a monster. Whatever it was, Ashton Kutcher was done staying quiet. He wasn't walking into that courtroom as a famous person. He was there as someone who had seen too much and said too little. And when he started talking, the courtroom wasn't ready for what they would hear. Because what Ashton told everyone about Diddy's parties, the secret bad things happening, and how power was used to hurt people wasn't just explosive. It was a warning that would shake all of Hollywood. What made a man who spent years building groups to stop people from hurting kids suddenly admit he had been quiet about the very crimes he said he was fighting? What did Ashton see at those special Diddy parties that bothered him for years? And why now, when speaking out could destroy everything he had built? The answers would prove that even Hollywood's most trusted people had been hiding terrible secrets. And Ashton Kutcher's confession would make sure that the entertainment world would never look the same again. The feeling in courtroom 318 of the Manhattan Federal Building was already exciting when Ashton Kutcher appeared in the doorway. For weeks, the Diddy trial had been getting more and more intense. The lawyers trying to prove Diddy was guilty had been carefully showing their case against Sean Combs. They were telling about claims of organized crime, hurting people, and sexual assault that went on for many years. But when Kutcher walked through those heavy wooden doors, everything changed. The actor known for that 70s show and 2.5 Men looked nothing like his usual confident self. His face was pale and his hands were shaking a little as he walked to the witness chair. The big smile that had made audiences love him for years was gone. The judge, Honorable Sarah Chen, raised an eyebrow as Kutcher's lawyers came to talk to her quietly. People in the courtroom started whispering to each other. Reporters quickly typed on their phones, trying to be the first to report the news that Ashton Kutcher had just become a surprise witness in one of the biggest celebrity trials ever. Diddy, sitting at the table where defendants sit in his navy blue suit, suddenly looked up from his legal papers. For the first time during the trial, his calm look cracked. His jaw got tight and his eyes locked onto Kutcher with a stare that made several jury members look uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Kutcher's lawyer started, "my client has information that's really important to this case. Information that he's carried for years and information that he can't keep quiet about anymore." The team of lawyers trying to prove Diddy was guilty looked at each other. This wasn't planned. This wasn't part of their plan. But when someone as famous as Ashton Kutcher wants to tell their story in a federal trial, you listen. Judge Chen said okay, and from that moment on, the whole trial changed direction. Kutcher walked to the witness stand slowly. His eyes never met Diddy's stare. He moved the microphone with shaking hands and looked right at the jury. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but empty, like a man who had been carrying something really heavy for way too long. "I need to tell you about the parties," he started. "The parties that weren't really parties, and what I saw there that I should have told people about years ago." The courtroom got completely quiet. You could hear the air conditioner humming. Even the person writing down everything seemed to stop, like she understood she was about to write down something that would change Hollywood history. Because what Ashton Kutcher was about to tell everyone wasn't just celebrity gossip. It wasn't just another scandal. It was a confession that would show one of the entertainment world's darkest secrets and prove that some of Hollywood's biggest names had been helping with crimes they had spent years publicly fighting against. Ashton Kutcher's story with Sean Combs started in 2003 when both their careers were at the top. Kutcher was doing great with the success of that 70s show and his new MTV prank show Punk'd. Diddy was ruling the music world as both a rapper and someone who helped make music, and their friendship seemed normal. Two young, successful guys taking over different parts of entertainment. I met Sean at a party for people in the business in the Hollywood Hills, Kutcher said as he told his story. His voice got stronger as he got more comfortable talking. He was charming, successful, everything you'd expect from someone at his level. He talked about business deals, about changing the industry, about using our fame for good things. What started as work respect quickly became a friendship. Diddy would invite Kutcher to special events, introduce him to other important people in the business, and give advice on how to go from being an actor to being a business person. For a young star still figuring out Hollywood's complicated social world, Diddy's help felt really valuable. The invitations started out normal, Kutcher continued. Birthday parties, album release celebrations, charity events. These were fancy parties with everyone from actors to musicians to business people. Nothing seemed weird. But as their friendship got deeper, the invitations became more special. Smaller groups, more private settings. And always, Kutcher noticed, they happened at Diddy's different houses. The Miami mansion, the Hamptons house, and most often a huge property in the Hollywood Hills that seemed made for privacy. The first time I noticed something was wrong was at a party in 2004, Kutcher said, stopping to drink some water. There were maybe 30 people there, all celebrities or business people, but the feeling was different. More charged, more secretive, more secretive. He described how these parties had rules that nobody said out loud. Phones were taken at the door. Legal papers about not telling secrets were casually mentioned in conversations. And there were always young people, people who wanted to be actors, models, musicians, who seemed to be there for reasons that weren't totally clear. Sean would introduce these young people as new talent, Kutcher said. He'd say he was helping them or giving them chances. But the way he acted with them, the way other guests looked at them, it felt like a predator. The actor's voice got quieter as he described seeing more and more uncomfortable situations. Young women who seemed way too drunk even though they said they barely drank anything. Private rooms that guests were told not to go into, and always the feeling that something darker was happening just under the surface of these fancy parties. I started saying no to invitations, Kutcher said. I'd make excuses, work stuff, family things, anything to avoid going back. Sean kept trying. He'd call me personally, send cars to pick me up, make it clear that he noticed when I wasn't there. The pressure to go got worse in 2005 when Kutcher started his first tech business. Suddenly, he needed connections in the industry more than ever. Diddy made himself seem like a really important friend, someone who could open doors and give introductions that could make or break Kutcher's business dreams. That's when I realized I was stuck, Kutcher admitted, his hands tight in his lap. I needed Sean's help for my business deals, but going to his parties meant seeing things that made me feel sick. I convinced myself I could ignore what I was seeing, that it wasn't my job to do something about it. He described one specific thing that happened in late 2005 that would bother him for years. At a small party at Diddy's Miami house, Kutcher saw what he could only describe as a young actress being forced into a bad situation with several older business people. She couldn't have been more than 19, Kutcher said, his voice breaking a little. She was clearly under the influence of something stronger than alcohol. And when I tried to help, to suggest maybe she should go home, Sean pulled me aside. He told me that if I cared about my career, about my future in this business, I learned to mind my own business. He said that everyone at these parties understood the rules and that breaking those rules had bad consequences. It was then that Kutcher realized he wasn't just a guest at these parties. He was a witness, and his silence was being bought with career opportunities and business connections. The weight of that understanding would drive him to eventually build his group that fights against people who hurt kids. Maybe, he now admitted, as a way to make up for his years of helping by staying quiet. Kutcher's voice got steady as he got to the most damaging part of his story. The courtroom was completely silent. Jury members were leaning forward, and even the usually serious judge seemed really interested in what he was saying. I kept going to Sean's parties for 3 more years, Kuchar said. Between 2005 and 2008, I saw systematic abuse disguised as business networking. But it wasn't until a party in December 2007 that I saw something that made me realize just how organized and planned this all was. He described arriving at Diddy's Hollywood Hills house for what was supposed to be a small holiday party. About 20 business people were there: actors, producers, record company people, and several tech business people like himself. But this time, Kuchar noticed something different about how everything was set up. There were cameras, he said bluntly. Not the obvious kind that you'd expect at a party, but hidden cameras. Professional equipment positioned throughout the main party areas. When I asked Sean about them, he laughed and said they were for security. But Kuchar's worries grew. As the evening went on, he started paying closer attention to what was happening. Young women and men, all saying they wanted to be entertainers, were paired with older, powerful business people. The pattern was clear. I watched Sean operate like a movie director, Kuchar said. He'd suggest that certain people get to know each other better in private rooms. He'd make sure drinks were filled up at specific times, and he'd position himself where he could watch everything happening. The most disturbing discovery came when Kuchar, looking for a bathroom, accidentally walked into what he thought was an empty room. Instead, he found a fancy recording setup with multiple computer screens showing feeds from throughout the house. Sean was there with 2 other men I didn't recognize, Kuchar said. They were watching the feeds, commenting on what they were seeing, and Sean was giving directions through some kind of communication system to people at the party. When Diddy noticed Kuchar in the doorway, his reaction was quick and scary. He didn't seem surprised or embarrassed, Kuchar remembered. Instead, he invited me in like he wanted me to see what he was doing. He said, "Ashton, this is how real power works in this industry. We create opportunities, we document them, and we ensure mutual understanding." Kuchar described feeling sick as he realized the full scope of what he was seeing. This wasn't just abuse. It was a systematic operation designed to compromise powerful people in the entertainment industry. Sean explained that everyone who came to his parties understood the arrangement, Kuchar continued. He said that participation created mutual insurance, that nobody would expose anyone else because everyone had something to lose. The recording equipment, Kuchar learned, captured everything. Every interaction, every compromising moment, every illegal activity. Diddy had built a collection of material that could destroy careers, end marriages, and ruin lives with the click of a button. He told me I was now part of the system, Kuchar said, his voice barely above a whisper. He said that my presence at these parties, my knowledge of what happened, made me complicit, and that complicity would be documented just like everything else. Kuchar described feeling trapped in a nightmare situation. He had witnessed serious crimes, but reporting them would expose his own attendance and potential complicity. His career, his relationships, his entire life could be destroyed by association. Sean made it clear that fighting the system would be useless, Kuchar said. He had recordings of powerful people in compromising situations. He had evidence of illegal activities involving some of the biggest names in entertainment, and he had the resources to destroy anyone who threatened to expose him. The most chilling moment came when Diddy showed Kuchar a sample of his insurance collection, video footage of a well-known Hollywood director doing illegal things with a minor at one of the parties. That's when I understood the full scope of what I was dealing with, Kuchar said. This wasn't just about parties or networking. This was about control. Sean had created a system where powerful people could do their worst things and then used evidence of those actions to control them. Kuchar described leaving that party feeling shocked and horrified. He realized that he had not only witnessed serious crimes, but had become tangled in a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of the entertainment industry. I went home that night and couldn't sleep for weeks. I kept thinking about all the young people I'd seen at those parties, all the situations I'd witnessed, all the times I could have spoken up, but didn't. It was this realization that would eventually drive him to start his group that fights against people who hurt kids, though he now admitted it was as much about personal guilt as genuine activism. I thought if I could fight trafficking publicly, maybe it would balance out my private silence, Kuchar confessed. But the guilt never went away. And every time I spoke publicly about protecting victims, I thought about all the victims I'd failed to protect when it mattered most. The courtroom remained silent as Kuchar finished this part of his story. Several jury members appeared visibly shaken, and even Diddy's usually confident attitude had cracked. His face was pale and his hands were clasped tightly in his lap. As Kuchar continued his story, he detailed how Diddy's operation worked as a sophisticated blackmail and control network that went far beyond simple party hosting. After that December 2007 party, my relationship with Sean changed completely, Kuchar explained. He began calling me regularly, not for social reasons, but to discuss business opportunities that always seemed to come with strings attached. These conversations, Kuchar revealed, followed a consistent pattern. Diddy would mention specific investment opportunities or business partnerships that could benefit Kuchar's growing tech businesses. But embedded in these discussions were subtle reminders of their shared experiences and the importance of keeping quiet. Sean never directly threatened me, Kuchar said. He was too smart for that. Instead, he'd mention how other people who had attended his parties were now doing great in their careers, and how those who had distanced themselves seemed to encounter unexpected obstacles. Kuchar described how this psychological manipulation created a climate of fear among Diddy's social circle. People who had attended the parties found themselves caught in a web of mutual dependency and shared guilt that made speaking out nearly impossible. The genius of Sean's system was that it made everyone complicit, Kuchar said. By attending these parties, by witnessing what happened, by accepting the career benefits that came from Sean's connections, we all became part of the system we should have been fighting against. He detailed how Diddy would strategically leak information about his insurance collection to maintain control. A compromising photo might surface briefly before being quickly removed. A rumor about a recording might circulate just long enough to reach its target. These calculated demonstrations of power served as constant reminders of what Diddy could do to anyone who crossed him. I watched careers get destroyed overnight, Kuchar said. Actors who had been rising stars suddenly couldn't get roles. Directors found their projects mysteriously losing funding. Musicians discovered that their songs were being pulled from radio stations, and it always seemed to happen to people who had somehow disappointed Sean. The control extended beyond just party attendees. Kuchar described how Diddy cultivated relationships with media executives, law enforcement officials, and political figures, all of whom found themselves either compromised or indebted to him through various means. Sean understood that power in Hollywood isn't just about money or fame, Kuchar explained. It's about information. And he had information on everyone. Kuchar revealed that Diddy maintained detailed files on hundreds of industry figures, containing everything from financial information to personal secrets to evidence of illegal activities. This database served as the foundation for his influence network. He once showed me a file he had on a major studio executive, Kuchar said. It contained financial records, evidence of stealing money, photos from parties, and even personal family information. Sean said this was just one of thousands of similar files he maintained. The systematic nature of the operation became clear as Kuchar described the roles different people played in maintaining it. There were the procurers, who recruited young people for the parties, the technical staff who managed the recording equipment, the financial specialists who handled payments and blackmail operations, and the enforcers who dealt with anyone who threatened to expose the system. This wasn't just Sean acting alone, Kuchar emphasized. This was a well-organized criminal enterprise with dozens of people playing specific roles. And the deeper you got involved, the harder it became to extract yourself. Kuchar described his own attempts to distance himself from Diddy's orbit, only to find that their business interests had become so intertwined that complete separation was impossible. Every time he tried to reduce contact, new opportunities would arise that required Diddy's involvement or approval. I realized that I had become dependent on the very system I despised, Kuchar admitted. My business ventures, my industry relationships, even my charitable work. It was all connected to Sean in ways that I hadn't fully understood until it was too late. The most chilling aspect of Diddy's control system, according to Kuchar, was how it normalized the abuse of power and exploitation of vulnerable people. By making everyone complicit and everyone vulnerable, Diddy had created an environment where reporting crimes felt impossible and protecting victims seemed secondary to protecting oneself. The worst part was how the system made you rationalize your silence. Every event I attended, every business deal I facilitated, every public appearance where I praised him, it was all contributing to his ability to continue operating. The final trigger came when Kuchar learned that Diddy was actively recruiting new victims through social media, targeting young people who idolized him and other celebrities in his circle. Cool. I saw posts from teenagers talking about wanting to attend Sean's parties, about how meeting him would be their big break, Kuchar said. And I knew exactly what they were walking into. I couldn't live with myself knowing that my continued silence was helping him find new victims. Kuchar described months of careful preparation before deciding to come forward. He consulted with federal prosecutors, gathered his own evidence, and worked with lawyers to understand the potential legal and personal consequences of his testimony. I knew that speaking out would likely destroy my career, he said. I knew it would put my family under intense scrutiny. I knew it would expose my own complicity in ways that would be humiliating and potentially criminal. But I also knew that staying silent made me complicit in every future crime Sean committed. The decision to testify was ultimately motivated by a conversation with his wife Mila, who encouraged him to prioritize his values over his career concerns. Mila told me that our children would eventually learn about this period of my life, Kuchar said, and she asked me what I wanted them to learn, that their father stayed silent to protect his career, or that he spoke up to protect other people's children. That conversation, combined with his growing certainty that Diddy's criminal activities were escalating, finally convinced Kuchar to contact federal investigators and offer his testimony. I realized that my anti-trafficking work meant nothing if I wasn't willing to speak out against trafficking when I witnessed it personally, he concluded. And I couldn't call myself a protector of children while enabling someone who was harming them. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak as Kuchar prepared to deliver the most damaging part of his testimony. He turned slightly in his chair, making direct eye contact with Diddy for the first time since taking the stand. "Sean, I need you to understand something," Kuchar said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "For 15 years, I carried your secrets. I protected your reputation. I enabled your crimes. And I convinced myself it was because I was trapped, because speaking out was impossible, because the system was too powerful." Diddy's attorney immediately objected, claiming Kuchar was making speeches rather than providing testimony, but Judge Chen allowed him to continue. "But the truth is simpler than that," Kuchar continued, never breaking eye contact with Diddy. "I stayed silent because it was easier than being brave. I chose my career over other people's safety. I chose my comfort over other people's lives." The courtroom was absolutely silent as Kuchar reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photograph. "This is a picture from your party in December 2007, he said, holding it up for the jury to see. "The party where you showed me your recording operation. I took this photo with my phone when you weren't looking because some part of me knew I might need evidence someday." The photograph showed Diddy standing next to the bank of monitors, clearly visible in the background of what appeared to be a casual party photo. It was the first physical evidence linking Diddy directly to the surveillance operation Kuchar had described. "I've carried this photo for 16 years, Kuchar said. "And every time I spoke publicly about fighting trafficking, every time I accepted an award for my humanitarian work, every time I looked at my own children, I thought about this photo and what it represented." Diddy's composure finally cracked completely. And his face flushed red and he leaned forward in his chair, whispering urgently to his lawyer. For the first time in the trial, he looked genuinely rattled. You built an empire on the suffering of vulnerable people, Kuchar continued, his voice growing stronger. You used your power and influence to exploit, abuse, and control others, and you made people like me complicit by making us believe that speaking out was impossible. He turned back to the jury, the photograph still in his hand. I'm not here asking for forgiveness, Kuchar said. I'm not here trying to make myself look like a hero. I'm here because staying silent any longer would make me as guilty as the person who committed these crimes. The most powerful moment came when Kuchar addressed the victims directly. To every person who was hurt at those parties, to every young person who was exploited, to every victim who has been waiting for someone with knowledge to speak up, I am sorry. I am sorry for every day I stayed quiet. I am sorry for every opportunity I had to help you and didn't take it. And I am sorry that it took me 16 years to find the courage to do what I should have done in 2007. Finally, Kuchar turned back to Diddy one last time. You once told me that this is how real power works in the entertainment industry, he said. You said that everyone understood the arrangement, that everyone was complicit, that nobody would ever speak out because everyone had too much to lose. He paused, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably long. You were wrong? With that, Kuchar placed the photograph on the evidence table and returned to his seat. The courtroom remained silent for several long moments, the weight of his testimony settling over everyone present. Diddy sat motionless, his face pale and his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. For the first time in his career, Sean Combs looked like a man who had finally run out of options, out of leverage, and out of power. The walls of silence that had protected him for decades had finally begun to crumble, and the man who had once controlled Hollywood's most powerful figures now sat powerless in a federal courtroom, facing the consequences of his crimes. As Kuchar stepped down from the witness stand, the immediate aftermath was unlike anything the federal courthouse had ever seen. Court officers had to maintain order as reporters rushed to file breaking news stories. The phrase Ashton Kutcher testimony was trending worldwide within minutes. Outside the courthouse, Kuchar was met by a swarm of media, but he declined to answer questions. Instead, he read a brief, prepared statement that would be replayed on every major news network for days. Today I told the truth about something I should have spoken about years ago, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. I hope my testimony helps bring justice for the victims, and I hope it encourages other witnesses to come forward with their own experiences. The entertainment industry's reaction was swift and devastating. Within hours of Kuchar's testimony, major studios began distancing themselves from projects associated with Diddy. Streaming platforms pulled his content. Corporate sponsors canceled endorsement deals. The carefully constructed empire that had taken decades to build began crumbling in real time. But the impact went far beyond just Diddy's business interests. Kuchar's testimony had exposed a system of complicity that implicated dozens of other industry figures. Suddenly, everyone who had attended those parties, everyone who had stayed silent, everyone who had enabled the system was under scrutiny. Social media exploded with speculation about other celebrities who might have knowledge of Diddy's crimes. The #Hollywood silence began trending as people demanded answers from other public figures known to have been in Diddy's social circle. Several other celebrities quickly issued statements through their lawyers, either denying knowledge of any crimes or claiming they were cooperating with federal investigators. The message was clear. The era of protective silence was ending. Federal prosecutors announced that Kuchar's testimony had provided crucial corroborating evidence for their case, and that they expected additional witnesses to come forward. They also revealed that the photograph Kuchar had provided matched other evidence they had collected, creating a stronger foundation for their prosecution. For Kuchar personally, the aftermath was complicated. While many praised his courage in finally speaking out, others criticized him for staying silent for so long. His anti-trafficking organization faced intense scrutiny, with critics questioning how he could have advocated for victims publicly while protecting an alleged perpetrator privately. In subsequent interviews, Kuchar was candid about his motivations and regrets. "I'm not asking anyone to see me as a hero," he said. "I'm asking people to understand that systems of abuse rely on good people staying silent. And I'm hoping that my example, both my years of silence and my decision to finally speak, helps other people find the courage to tell their own truths." The broader impact on Hollywood was immediate and far-reaching. The industry began implementing new safeguards and reporting mechanisms. Several major figures announced they were stepping away from projects or positions. And most importantly, other victims began coming forward with their own stories. As this story continues to develop and more witnesses come forward, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss any breaking updates. Hit that like button if you think Ashton Kutcher did the right thing by finally speaking out. And let us know in the comments what you think about celebrities who stay silent about crimes they witness. The trial continues, but one thing is certain. Ashton Kutcher's testimony has forever changed how Hollywood handles its darkest secrets. The system of silence and complicity that protected predators for decades has been shattered, and the industry will never be the same. The question now isn't whether justice will be served, but how many other powerful figures will finally be held accountable for their crimes, and how many other witnesses will find the courage to follow Kutcher's example and speak their truth, no matter how long they've stayed silent.